Well, thank you for everybody joining us today. I'm Scott Robinson, Director of the REIT Center here at NYU Shack Institute. I'm joined by Aaron Potter, Vice President of ESG at UMH Communities, a listed REIT that was formed just recently back in 1968. I think you guys are, if not the oldest, one of the oldest REITs in existence. It's very impressive. Aaron is joining me today as part of a series the REIT Center has been hosting in support of research we've been doing about rethinking affordable housing. Prior to the pandemic, there was a lot of understanding that strained federal and municipal resources, widening income gaps, deteriorating transportation infrastructure, and rising construction costs were really making housing unaffordable, and that there would need to be solutions brought to the table above and beyond federal and municipal funding. I had worked with students in 2019 and into 2020 doing research, exploring ways of bringing together impact investors, modular construction, and special purpose REIT vehicles to help provide more of a private market-based approach to addressing housing affordability. We've had prior conversations with some ESG and impact investors, but I'm really excited about today's conversation with Aaron because UMH is a REIT. One of the things my students were interested in having a REIT involved in affordable housing, whether that's regulated or unregulated, is the fact that it opens up the sector to a whole nother basket of investors. You could argue that retail investors, mom and pop investors, especially in the communities that are being impacted by housing affordability, are some of the best sources of capital to provide the solution. So happy to bring that into this conversation today. And modular construction. A lot of people think about modular, when they hear modular construction, they think about high-rise, dense urban markets and that type of kind of, I'll call it tech-enabled, controlled environment construction. But the reality is manufactured homes have been around for 60 years. They are, in essence, modular housing, and the construction costs therein are considerably cheaper or cheaper than traditional build. And so that helps. It's another lever to pull to bring down that cost basis. We'll call it more of a supply side approach. So as I said, this is a great called market-based conversation around that research. So maybe with that, Aaron, I'll hand it over to you to introduce yourself, talk to us a little bit about UMH, and then you've got a pretty compelling presentation you want to share with us.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Scott. I appreciate the kind words, and I also did appreciate reading that report that you had about how REITs could help the affordable housing crisis, and how manufactured housing or modular housing, the differences in those I'll touch on later, but are pretty much are built in the same way and use the same efficiencies to get the job done of providing affordable housing. And today I'd like to go over a presentation that I've written, a paper around the paper that I've written on how manufactured housing could specifically help attack the affordable housing crisis by providing a supply side solution, and how the private markets as well as the GSEs need to work together and think a little bit outside the box on how we can increase the amount of manufactured housing communities and overall manufactured housing shipments throughout the country. In the presentation, we will definitely be going through where the housing market is today, and then ways that ways that manufactured housing could benefit and supply the needed housing at affordable rates. So go over to slide 3. So the first slide here on the left, you will see that there's been a net migration out of cities and a net migration into suburban areas of about 2 million for 2020 and about 2 million for 2016 to 2018 out of cities and into suburban areas. This is due somewhat because of people realizing that they can get a bit more bang for their buck in terms of space in more suburban areas, as well as employers moving out of larger metros and into smaller boutique cities throughout the South and other states. this is also compounded by the fact that during the pandemic, the work environment changed, and people are now able, allowed first through the laws and so on to work from home, and then later on by the employers, and people have a greater number chose to stay to work at home. This has created an increased demand in housing, one, to fight the virus, and two, to actually be able to work comfortably in their own homes. So in the next slide, you'll see that some pictures of more urban areas and how the housing is done there compared to housing in our manufactured housing communities. In the next 3 slides, you'll see pictures of homes in our communities and the overall community.
Gotta say, that looks pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's one of our communities in Pennsylvania, and that's one of our communities in Maryland, Cinnamon Woods. That's nice. A 55 and older community. So there's a lot more room for the older residents to have a driveway and to do other things. Right now we have about 69 homes there, 68 homes, with an additional 69 coming on the way in phase 2, and final 48 coming in phase 3.
And all of your communities have common areas, maybe not pools, but community centers and rec centers and whatnot?
Yeah, just about all the communities have a community center. There will be different amenities like places for people to work out. Obviously not in the 55 and older, but all age communities. We have playgrounds, basketball hoops, and an exciting joint venture that I'll get in later on. We built that with a pool, a splash pad for the kids, pickleball court, and bocce ball, and some other amenities that that's there for that all age community in Florida. But getting back to the to where the current housing market is, I found some interesting graphs by the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard that shows that the actual net change in occupied apartments is far outpaced the actual new completions in the market. That's showing a huge gap for where supply is and where demand is. In the graph to the right, you'll see that the value or cost for homes and apartments is soaring during that time as well. And this gap is due to that underproduction and that change in demographics as millennials and Gen Z start to enter the housing market, and Gen Z starts entering the workforce.
And indications are they're entering the housing market in suburban and possibly rural markets, not so much urban markets. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a bit spread out, but what's been seen is that and in some cases, they're also having to do so with roommates and other things like that to help with the cost. But yeah, they're going where the jobs are, and a lot of jobs are moving towards lower cities in the South, more boutique cities, and that's where they're moving to find housing that's affordable. And in those areas, their dollar may go a bit further than compared to big metros like New York, San Francisco, and the others. If you go to the next slide, you'll also see that that the median home price for homes has actually reached above 450,000, which is something that is the first time in recorded history, as well as something that most people will find very, very expensive. And although in November you'll hear reports of housing inflation going down and housing prices going down, but that's going down from double-digit price increases year over year. And it's my belief that although housing may not increase as much as it did in the past, that it will still keep high costs and possibly still increase. One factor being that a lot of people, compared to the housing mortgage in 2008, have locked in 30-year fixed rate mortgages at low interest rates. And the incentive to actually get out of those mortgages to then go buy a newer home, is not there, that's definitely going to keep people where they are. And, the also fact that coming up with a 20% down payment so that you don't have to pay for other things like mortgage insurance and other mortgage costs is going to keep people, in the homes where they're at as they see, the equity rise in their homes.
Right.
In the next slides, you'll see some statistics by Freddie Mac themselves. In the left, if you look at the third rung, you'll see that they're estimating an overall gap of 3.8 million homes. That's when you're dealing with vacancies and also obsolete housing, as well as just the undersupply of housing. So there's a huge 3.8 million unit gap in the homes that are needed to match supply with demand. One other worrying thing that they reported on is the fact that there's a lot less entry-level homes being built compared to previous decades. And this entry-level home is important for the markets, mainly because it actually creates a competition that's needed to drive down prices in homes. So if there's a seller in the market that's selling a more expensive home and then a seller that's selling a less expensive home, in order to actually attract that demand from that active willing participant in the market, they're going to have to drop the price of their home so that it's more competitive for the person buying. Without that, that will keep prices a lot higher and keep the housing affordability crisis where it is at today. And then in this next slide, I'd like to just touch on like what's going on that's making the housing market where it is. So as we just reported on, the housing prices are at historic highs, rental prices are at historic highs. People are not really being able to afford them. So we'll actually go into why people can't afford them and why the prices are so high. One being that there's been stagnant wage growth, somewhat, growth in wage growth, but you can't really call it growth when you take into account inflation. The other fact is that debt burdens are increasing. That would actually allow people to actually afford the monthly cost, but with their debt burdens going up and interest rate hikes coming in fast and now as of today, that's keeping people away from being able to afford those monthly costs. Rising construction costs for materials and a lack of labor productivity, which we'll touch on later, and then the overall outdated system of constructing these homes. In the next graph, even though it's a bit dated, you'll see that household incomes have been far outpaced by median home prices and rents and median rent growth. This has an alarming effect on people's ability not only afford the housing that they're in, but also afford other things that are crucial to living a productive and sustainable life, like transportation, like food and groceries, and like medical care costs. In this next graph here, you'll see that this is a little bit more up to date, going to 2021 and showing, and even though there is a decrease in the rent prices, this is typically going into the pandemic where landlords were unsure of the eviction moratorium, how that was all going to play out, and also unsure about how people were going to be able to live, losing their jobs and so on. But with the various stimulus payments and other government aid provided during that time, rents actually shot up, and people looking to stay at home and be at home caused a greater demand, something that I touched on earlier, for housing. So rents were actually skyrocketing during that period. In this next graph, we're looking at a ratio of home prices, sale prices to median family income. Now, if you were to go back, a couple of years ago, you would realize that this ratio is actually a lot less, and on average. And if you were to talk to different economists or different people in the housing market, they would say that you should not buy a home that's more than 2.5 times your actual annual income. Here, we're seeing that this across the country, obviously some metros and areas are worse than others, but on average is 4.8%, which is almost double what somebody that's giving you advice on buying a home would say that you should buy at.
Wow.
So that's showing that this affordability crisis is pretty rampant.
Yes, and affecting all markets.
Yeah, pretty much. And apart from the lack of wage growth to meet the rises in home prices and home costs overall, there has been increased debt burdens on households. The New York Fed reports that that student debt has risen by 19 million. That other debts, which include personal loans, which has risen by about 49 million, and auto loans has risen about 87 million. These debts are, could be a bit troubling, especially going into a higher interest rate environment, as these debts will get more expensive, and people that are now entering will have to pay higher interest rates on these debts.
Yep. Which,
The next-
so I just want an additional comment on the rental market. Even, landlords in the rental side are going to have to continue to push rents as much as they can, even if it's challenging, even if the job market's challenged, because their cost of capital is going up as well.
Exactly. And yeah, their cost of capital of the land is going up with inflation. Their cost of capital in terms of building the different construction materials is going up. So that is going to keep rents high, or it could just allow them to not enter the market, which would then, not give the supply there that's needed for rates to come down. In the next slide, it's a bit more of a graphical view of what's going on. So household debt reached a high in Q2 of 2022 of $16 trillion, while the orange, yellow line, whatever color you want to call that, is high, and I would say that's pretty good debt, and the purple is also there as well. I would say that's pretty good debt, meaning that its mortgage is just probably a 30-year fixed rate, probably been refinanced. The increases in student loan debt, auto debt, and other is something that that the overall economy and people need to be aware of, as that will keep them out of actually entering the home market and building equity, and something that is a wealth transfer that they're missing out on by not actually being a part of that orange line.
Right, great point.
So apart from the higher debts and mortgages, and sorry, not mortgages, but wages not keeping up with inflation of home prices, there has actually been a rise in construction costs, and these construction costs for different materials, whether that be wood, various sorts of metals, and plastics and so on, used in the home construction process, is pricing people out of the markets and actually making home builders focus more on the luxury markets, so that they know that even if this is going up X amount, that they will be able to price that back in to the home sales. So those, as you saw in the Freddie Mac graph, that the supply of homes in a critical price point is not being built because of the fact that construction materials are going so high. In this next slide, you'll see that that the labor productivity for single family homes, whether that be the output or hours worked, has gone down drastically, and this is over a 13-year time period. And this is also seen in the multifamily housing construction, as productivity is going down and output is basically not. This is something that has a critical effect on the supply of homes, being the fact that the productivity is going down, and it's kind of showing that type of way of building homes is actually being ineffective.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to point out that construction overall is something that's important for the economy. A $1 billion in added construction spending creates about 3,900 jobs, and it also creates other things in terms of local taxes being generated through sales taxes, also through more people coming in and living in these areas to build that tax revenue. So it benefits the localities as well, not just federal and the federal government. And it also benefits the fact that the local area now has housing, workforce housing. People do not have to drive as much and could actually be closer to their job, which would cause an economic boom for that area. The next slide shows where that travel time to work is the most significant, and that spatial mismatch between where employees are and where employers and employees are is something that is critical to a local economy. When there is housing, as I'll touch on it in a case study that I have, that actually helps to bring a bunch of local businesses back to that area. And finally, I'd like to touch on a report from McKinsey, as Scott, you made mention of earlier. They talk more about modular housing and how modular housing / prefabricated housing could decrease build times by 50%, how it could increase productivity and add $1.6 trillion to the overall worldwide economy. But the real difference between a modular home and a manufactured home is simply the fact that modular homes are built to state and local regulations, while a manufactured home, a HUD code home, is built to federal regulations. Now, there should not be any biases by localities, which there are, and we'll touch on in a second, for manufactured housing, being that it is a federal preemptive building code, but that's the main difference between a modular home and a manufactured home. It's just the building certifications that it's built to. Typically, modular homes are also built on a foundation, unlike a manufactured homes in a community. But manufactured homes could be put on land and affixed to the ground and still be considered a manufactured home because of the codes that it's built to.
Gotcha. So the fact that they're built to federal codes, does that make it easier for the manufactured home builder to produce products, because they're not thinking about different zoning, they don't get bogged down in some of those nuances?
Exactly. So in a manufactured home factory, they're able to produce 5 to 8 homes per day, and that kind of typically just ranges based on the floor plan that they're building and any customizations that's going into the home. And before the pandemic, we would typically see shipments of our homes out from order date to property of about 1 to 3 months. Unfortunately, due to the supply chain constraints that COVID brought, and the fact that factories could not have as many people in the factory at one time, made these timelines kind of move out to 8 to 12 months. But the fact that the factories are able to have specialized labor in the factory, they'll have a certain crew work on just the framing, and that framing will move down the line where now they put in, the floorboards, and then down the line where they'll put in the walls, and then down the line where they put in the insulation and just the other parts of the home. They'll have the cabinetry and so on built in another part of the factory. Just the fact that people are working on specialized labor in different parts of the factory and moving it in an efficient way helps to, decrease that build time. Also, within these factories, especially larger builders like Clayton Homes and Skyline Homes, they've actually been able to achieve different ISO certifications for environmental sustainability, where they actually increase the recycling of the materials that go on. They also are able to do exact ordering, so they know that they're going to produce 5 homes per day, and then how much doors they need to order on a monthly basis, they already know. So that decreases any waste in that sense, and also the fact that the home is built in a covered facility leads to less toxic runoff and being exposed to different elements, any type of fungus buildup in the homes and in the wood during that construction process. So it actually becomes a much more environmentally friendly based construction process, and something that we like to lead with on an ESG front as well, apart from the fact that we're able to provide low cost, affordable housing.
Right. Great point.
But on that note, that will be touching more a little bit now on how UMH is actually able to provide provide lower cost housing compared to typical home builders, apartment builders, and we don't use low income housing tax credits or other government subsidies or traditional government subsidies to build our homes. We do it through the use of manufactured housing and through the vehicle, both of which allow us to do something that others in the market can't really do. There are other manufactured housing REITs on the New York Stock Exchange, and while they are great competitors, and we do piggyback ideas off of each other, the fact is that UMH likes to focus on workforce housing. We haven't gotten into much RVs or marinas, or having a significant portion of our communities be 55 and older. We do have most of them being all age, and through the use of manufactured housing, which I'll get into now, we're able to provide affordable housing to our residents. But a little bit of manufactured housing stats before we get to UMH directly. There are 8.4 million manufactured homes across the country, and they shelter about 22 million Americans. Manufactured home production accounts for about 9% of the new single family housing starts in the country. 51% of the new manufactured homes are placed in manufactured home communities. There's about 43,000 land lease communities throughout the country. The average rental increase on the homes in these communities was about 4.2%. UMH has historically raised rents on existing tenants by 4%, something that we're proud of, and that we like to lead with as well. There has been a lot of negative press by some media outlets saying that manufactured housing operators have come in and raised rents drastically to get to market rates and so on, and hurt the tenants that are there. But that's not something that we do. And we do typically buy turnaround communities, but we don't automatically raise rents on the existing residents to a point where they can't afford. But MHI, the Manufactured Housing Institute, has done a survey and said that 71% of residents cite affordability as a key driver for the purchase of their home, and that 90% of residents are satisfied with the homes that they have. And in rural areas, which is more where you'll find manufactured housing, because unfortunately it's hard to find enough space and acreage in large metros to put manufactured homes. It accounts for about 14% of the housing stock.
Gotcha.
There are 35 different corporations that build the homes in 143 different factories. And in 2021, they produced 105,000 homes roughly. This is a far cry from where it used to be in the late to mid 90s and early 2000s. They were seeing home productions of 350,000, 250,000, 200,000 due to a tough time in the housing market in 2006 and so on, and a harder time for builders to get back on their feet. There has been a slow rise back to 100,000, which we finally crossed for the first time since the early 2000s in 2021. Something that the whole industry is proud of, and something that we're continuing to look to expand on, as now the need for affordable housing for entry-level housing is becoming as prevalent as it is.
Well, I didn't realize the space was so decimated during the financial crisis.
Yeah, it got down to around 45,000 units per year, which is quite a small number, 50,000 units per year. But in 2022, the average cost of a manufactured home is on average about $108,000, $72 per square foot to construct. Single sections are about on average going for $72,000, while multi-section are going for $132,000. MHI reports that the average site cost without land to build a home in 2022 is about $365,000, $366,000, or $3,143 per square foot to build. So that's almost, double what it is for to build a home offsite without land in today's market. One of the big differences in manufactured housing, though, that sometimes does take away from that affordability is the fact that manufactured homes that are not affixed to the land are actually titled as personal property and receive personal property loans. These personal property loans are going for a lot higher than what mortgage rates are, and on average right now are about 7.5% to 10.5%. UMH is actually able to come a little bit below what market averages are at 7%, which is right in line with where actual mortgages are today. Something that we're proud to provide our customers and residents with.
Yeah, quick question here. Is UMH allowed to make loans to individuals who want to own their manufactured home?
Yeah, yes, we do provide loans on homes in our community. We have about a $57 million portfolio of loans that generates about $8 million a year. Yeah, we're proud of that, and we're continuing to grow that as we expand it and acquire more communities. So we do have a separate arm that deals with actually loaning out interest rates, and it is generating a sizable return.
Nice, thanks.
In this next slide, I want to talk about some of the problems that are not allowing not only UMH but the entire manufactured housing industry from reaching its potential. First being it's has a bit of a bad rap in terms of being trailer parks, and people live in them are not something that people would other housing would want to be around. But that's due to an outdated understanding of who manufactured residents are and what manufactured housing is. Some of the pictures that you saw in the beginning show that the product has come a long way since the 1970s, which is when the first HUD code laws were put in place, and today they are on par with regular site-built homes using the same materials, whether that be 2x4, 2x6 framing, having low E windows that help keep the draft out, and air conditioning and so on, and as well as having the proper insulation, and then coming with many upgrades that you would see in a typical site-built home if that customer wants to pay for them. And the other problem is a financing problem. We have been working with government-sponsored entities like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to decrease our cost of capital so that we can pass that on to others. And the other problem is that the government these Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae aren't buying the loans that they would as if they would have in a regular mortgage market. Because that they don't do that, there's a lack of a resale market that's hurting manufactured housing and actually hurting the resident the most. I'll kind of get into a little bit more detail on that in this next slide. So the fact that banks cannot bundle mortgage, chattel financing as they would a regular mortgage, they have less incentive to actually give out loans on manufactured homes. Manufactured homes, since they're typically in that $50,000 to $70,000 mark on the loan after a 10% down payment, they're considered high cost. So the fees to originate that loan and so on cost a lot more than it would in terms of percentage compared to a $450,000 home. So there's less incentive there. And the fact that the government state GSEs are not actually buying the home, those bundles, is hurting the consumer the most, because now they are having a hard time when they're reselling, finding somebody that can actually get that loan approved. For UMH, we don't see that as much as other strictly financing companies or other communities that don't provide financing, because we understand our homes in our communities the best. So if we do have a home that somebody's trying to sell, we can do brokered home sale, or if they do foreclose, we know exactly, what that home could be priced at. We would buy that in a sheriff's sale or the like, and get that home back on the market, because we don't want to have as vacancies in our communities if possible.
Mhm.
These next two slides are by the Urban Institute, and they describe how manufactured housing may not increase as much as traditional homes. They don't necessarily depreciate in value as a common conception is. It's like all other types of real estate and all other types of housing. If you're able to maintain your house in a way, that is desirable, that is keeping up with, the trends that are going on in housing, as well as just keeping it clean and in good order, that your home will appreciate, and will, allow you to build equity in your home. Unlike if you were to buy an apartment where there's not even a chance, not buy an apartment, but live in an apartment where there's not even a chance of you actually, putting any of that money towards equity or towards wealth creation. But in this slide, you'll see that the homes do appreciate in a similar fashion to traditional homes.
This is surprising. I didn't think that would be the case. I imagine this also is driven somewhat by the owner of the community and how they're keeping up the community, such as UMH, right?
Yeah, with the location and exactly with what we do, we're able to, increase the infrastructure where the home is, the sewer lines, the roads, landscaping, and so on, add amenities where we can, whether that be, playgrounds, fitness centers, pools, and actually unlock some of that value that, that's there. Something that we're proud of doing.
Nice.
Like I said, this second slide shows kind of similar to what the first slide was, but in the slide following, we'll get a little bit more into the REIT structure and how REITs are beneficial to manufactured housing and to overall housing crisis. The real estate investment trusts make real estate investing accessible to any and everybody. You can go and set up an account, whether that be a self account, self-trading account on the various platforms that they're out now today, or through a broker, and buy shares in the various types of real estate investment trusts that are out there. They have some for data centers, some for warehouses, others for timber, apartments, and the like. But the difference is that you don't actually have to go out and actually buy that type of real estate and manage that. The shareholders are able to actually own a portion of professionally managed portfolio of real estate, and they benefit from the incentives that commercial real estate has, which is quite a few. One could be a tax shelter, others could be long-term tenants, stable tenants, and also from the fact that they are public companies, so they are able to access public markets for common equity shares, for preferred shares, for debt issuance, and leverage, the different types of value that they've brought up, and assets that they've acquired in a much easier and more liquid way. And also shareholders are also able to profit off of the dividends that are returned to them, which I'll get into a little bit more detail in this next slide. There are some basic rules for being a REIT. One is that you must have at least 100 shareholders. The other is that 5 or fewer individuals cannot own 50% or more of the company. 75% of your annual gross income must be derived from real estate related income, so basically from rents, and no more than 5% could be considered non-qualifying. Also, 90% of your income must be redistributed as dividends, and any remaining percentage after that 90% would be taxed as ordinary income if a REIT decides to cap the dividend distribution at 90%. But dividend distributions could also be taxed in different ways. One way is through ordinary income. So if you are that shareholder and you do receive those dividends, they could just be added to your ordinary or added to your income and be taxed, at regular income rates. They could be taxed at capital gains rates, the 0, 15, 20%, depending on what tax rate you're at. And then finally, they could be receive very little tax and be what they call a return of capital, UMH, do the way through its dividends, a lot of the times returns its dividends as return of capital. So there's even less taxes on its actual shareholders when they receive their dividends. And with that, I'd like to go a little bit more into UMH and its portfolio. As you'll see, we're heavily constituted in Pennsylvania and Ohio, but we are starting to move further south into regions like Alabama, South Carolina. And what's not on here is our joint venture with Nuveen. We entered into a joint venture with Nuveen Real Estate, which is a teacher's pension fund, last year to develop brand new communities. As we've seen cap rates continue to rise, which has been something that a new phenomena, something that's been making development actually almost on par or better than buying existing properties and redeveloping them. So we have entered with Nuveen Real Estate to do that. It's about 165, 175 million joint venture. And what that allows us to do is actually develop these communities without taking such a hard hit on earnings as a public company, by having them structured to deal with their 60% owners at first, with us having the first right of refusal on the sale of the property after a certain amount of time. And that property is in Florida, helping us expand even further south and building our footprint there. But some highlights I'd like to point out here is that overall we have about 85% occupancy, which is something that we see as healthy. That means that we have a lot of room to grow into, and things that and vacant sites and vacant acreage that we can develop on. So there is a plenty of growth story here, as well as having average site rent for home owning residents of $488 across all of our communities. An average a monthly rent of about $844 across all of our rentals. We have about 9,000 rentals in our portfolio at the moment, and they are about 95% occupied. So we are very happy with our rental growth over the years, as well as our rental occupancy. The fact that we are able to provide rental rates that are affordable to low income earners, so that's people that are making between 50 and 80% of their area median income in any given market that we're in, was actually reviewed by Sustainalytics in a framework that I wrote that we could issue ESG debt off of, and they recognize the fact that we are able to provide affordable housing to the target market of low income earners, meaning that those people won't be paying more than 30% of their income on our housing alone, as well as the fact that we are able to provide some of the lowest in industry financing rates on the homes for the home owning residents. And like I said, that was reviewed by a second party opinion. And unfortunately, right now, during a high interest rate environment, it's not maybe the best idea for us to raise capital through debt markets, but it's still a great marketing piece and evidence showing that we are able what we are able to do. Here, touch on some of the highlights that I've talked about before. The fact that we have 131 communities, almost 25,000 sites in 10 states, adding the JV, 32 communities, over 25,000 sites in 11 states. We have an expanding rental portfolio of about 9,000 units. Typically, we try to add 800 to 700, maybe 900 homes a year. Fortunately, last year we were only able to add about 400 to 500 homes because of the supply chain constraints. But that is unraveling now, and something that we're being able to see in all markets. Also, the fact that, as I mentioned before, we have a lot of vacant acreage, about 1,900, and we have some vacant sites as well. Add those together, and we have about 7,600 future lots that we can develop and fill. showing that we do have a lot of room to grow, and we're continuing to buy communities as we can and develop where we can as well. And then finally, in the bottom section, you'll see that that loan portfolio that I mentioned earlier of about 57 million that's grossing. That's increasing about 8 million per year. Those are things that's an extra source of revenue that we're proud to enjoy.
Yeah, those home sales, are those, how did you come across? Are you a reseller of newly made homes, or are those homes how'd you get a hold of those homes?
So that on the bottom left, you'll see that we sold 324 homes last year. That is a mix of new homes. I don't know the exact makeup off the top of my head of what the new homes sold were and what the used homes sold were, but that is a mix of both new and used. So new straight from the factory placed in our community, sold to a resident, or a resident that already lived in the home. We take, and they're allowing us to sell the home, or in other ways we acquired the home. Sometimes if it's an older home, we'll buy it straight from them, take out that older home and put in a new home, sell a new home.
Okay.
That helps increase the value of the community, increase the value of the homes around that home. And yeah, so that home sold is a mix of new and used homes.
Gotcha. Thanks.
In this picture here, you'll see exactly where our communities are. At the far bottom, you'll see the joint venture that I talked of. Also, you'll see that we're starting to try to fill out in the South area. We have a great Tennessee community and managers out there, as well as having a great concentration in the Marcellus and Utica Shale areas of Pennsylvania and Ohio. That allows us to sell mineral rights for for fracking or for other uses of getting natural gas out of the ground. That could be a potential added revenue cost for us, although we are in a bit of an energy crisis worldwide due to some of the laws and regulations going on. We're not seeing as much activity as you might have thought during this time for mineral rights, but it's something that we are seeing more people inquire about. But we do enjoy having, a great concentration in those areas.
Mhm.
Next, I'd like to talk about a community, a value-add acquisition that we had in Tennessee, and explain exactly how we're able to do what we do. So being able to access equity and lower cost of capital through the public REIT structure, we're able to buy communities that are run down. So buying a 55% occupied community is something that we typically look for to do. When we bought it, it only had 79 rentals. The average site rent was about $302, and they were grossing the net income around 497,000, about 500,000. We bought this in 2011, so quite a few years ago. But throughout that time, we've been adding rentals. We added about 140 rentals. We increased occupancy by about 40%. We're about 95% now. We're grossing around 1.5 million. That's a 200% increase. And we've invested about $18 million in this community. With this, we actually bought the land, close to the community, and we're actually starting for lack of a better term, a brand new community, but you could also just consider it an expansion of about another 220 homes called Duck River. That's in its first phases of being built. But that shows that, once we enter a market, we're able to increase occupancy and get it to a stabilized rate, and then look to expand on the vacant acreage that we have there. Like I said, that's going to be about a 220 space community, and it's in its beginning stages. But we increased rents from $302 to $434 over 11 years. So that's a slow increase of getting rents to where they were. But the main thing is that we've increased occupancy, and one of the worst things in our business is having a vacant site. So filling that occupancy with rentals is something that we've pioneered and something that we're proud to do. Those rentals came in, at most is kind of the main cost in developing a community, but something we're willing to do as it provides rental income for not only now but into the future. And finally, I would just like to summarize some of our capabilities and touch on another couple points that I kind of touched on before, but didn't get into detail. So first being that we're able to access, capital through the public REIT structure. With that, we're able to purchase below market value add communities that represent significant upside when you fill up the vacancies and upgrade the community. In terms of upgrading community, we do, new roads, new water and sewage systems, add the necessary plumbing, sidewalks, mailboxes, other things that just really help to make the community more efficient. If it's in an area where we can put gates around the community, we do that, add walking paths, clean up the pond if it's around the pond area, and just make the community somewhere that's just a nicer overall place for families or for individuals alike. We tried to get occupancy up to 75% in about a 3-year time period if it's below that, because after 75%, our expenses per unit start to go down or start to level off, and after that it's pretty much mostly profit from there on out. Also, when we're upgrading the communities, we're able to go back to banks and refinance our mortgages on the community. This helps us unlock capital to continue to upgrade the community, buy existing land nearby, and add more rentals. Since manufactured housing is produced at half the cost per square foot compared to site build, we're able to develop lots at a much cheaper rate. And when we sell homes, we're able to lock in that sales profit, as well as collect money on the lot rent and on the financing of the home. And as I mentioned, rental units help increase that vacancy. Another thing I touched on earlier was the fact that we're in a low cap rate environment, making the properties pretty expensive, meaning that we've looked in other ways to continue to grow the company, and that's been through development. We've been working with local contractors that know the zoning boards and that have a better, more efficient time of expediting the process of getting the approvals. As I said, they're actually able to talk and kind of dispel some of those NIMBY, people that come around and say, hey, we don't want this. It's going to increase taxes. It's going to increase traffic. It's going to make the schools more crowded and so on, and explain to them that this is something that you do want, and it will actually help benefit the economy by, being a boom for employers, for the local, generating more taxes and so on. And the other thing that other couple of points that I wanted to mention was the fact that we have worked with Fannie Mae to open up a credit facility of about $100 million at 2.8%. That allowed us to decrease our interest rates on the financing of our homes for our customers to as low as 4.99%. Unfortunately, because of the inflationary environment that we're in right now, that has increased to what I said earlier, about 7%. But we're happy to do that once we were able to unlock, cheaper cost financing, showing that we are trying to do our best to provide affordable housing. That also decreased our cost of capital in the sense that we're able to replace $100 million of preferred stock at 8% and higher with $2.8 million Fannie mortgage rate financing. We have worked with Nuveen to structure a joint venture to develop new communities that's not dragging on earnings as much. We've also added issuance in Israel of $100 million in the Israel market at around 4.25% this year, accessing capital from outside the U.S. First for us and something that we're proud of, as well as opening up our own opportunity zone fund, which is maximizing and utilizing the opportunity zone tax incentives of deferring capital gains, as well as seeing a step up in basis for when a property is sold. We have the first right to refusal on those homes, so that is basically creating a pipeline for future growth and allowing investors to maximize their returns by investing in affordable housing in an opportunity zone, which is one of the main things that opportunity zones was created to do, was to create more affordable housing and to increase the economic activity in those areas. That fund is brand new and just opened this year. We have one property in there and from South Carolina, but working on getting another property in Georgia in that fund. But we are happy to have that fund open and successfully have this first property. So with that, I want to thank you guys for your time, for your attention, and hand it back over to Scott to see if he has any further questions.
Thank you so much, Aaron. That was amazing. I didn't anticipate you covering so much ground, but obviously you and UMH have been very busy, so there's a lot to discuss. So thank you. Curious. First off, I love the title of your presentation, Think Outside the Box, a supply side solution. I like that, thinking outside the box, I always like. But the supply side solution is in line with some of the research I worked on with my students. But it sounds like you're still a little bit constrained by, the amount of manufactured homes that are being built, and therefore that can be utilized by you and some of your peers, but also by two, NIMBYism and kind of the challenges of opening new communities. I guess if you had it your way, what do you think would be a better lever to pull to kind of ease the pressures in your ecosystem, having more homes manufactured or being able to open more communities?
Those are both great problems, and I think that what would be best to be fixed first is the NIMBYism, because we are having homes come in. The problem is that since there's not as many manufactured home developments coming on board and new developments coming on board, after a few years, the actual sites that are there will be filled, and then there won't be actually a place for, even if we increase the amount of homes that are built, a place for those homes to go. So the first part would definitely be to combat that NIMBYism. And one exciting thing that the industry has put on was a Homes on the Hill event, an innovative Homes on the Hill event, where we work with MHI and other market leaders to get manufactured homes on Capitol Hill, right in front of where Congress works, so that we can get different senators and different legislators to come and tour the homes, see the homes, and actually feel what's going on in the industry. Know that this is something that is viable, that that is here. There was other participants in there, 3D printed homes and other things of that nature, which is we obviously want to see innovation around the whole housing market. But it was great to see that manufactured homes can be built in a short time frame and actually delivered with furniture, with everything included, and have the legislators tour through them. Apart from having a double wide and a single wide, there was also the ADU, which is a smaller accessory dwelling unit there. So they can see all the different types of homes that UMH is buying and that the factories are producing. They also at the event were tiny homes, but it showed that somebody that would buying a tiny home may as well almost buy a manufactured home. Not because the prices are so similar, but also for the fact that you just get a lot more space and it's more comfortable. Although you can't just pick up your manufactured home and leave and go state to state as you may with a tiny home and a hitch. Manufactured homes could be moved off of community grounds onto private land if need be.
It's just not as easy as people assume, right? They're really not mobile, and that's why they're manufactured homes now, right?
Yeah.
And look, I think your slides 26 and 27 really kind of highlight the quality of the homes, right? The fact that they're increasing in value over the past 30, 40 years, pretty much in tandem with traditional homes.
Yeah, no, it's something that's not spoken about enough, and as I mentioned, it's location, 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 and it's about how you maintain that property, where how it's being maintained, especially in the community, how the rest of the community is being maintained. If there's one nice home in a bad community, yeah, that home's gonna suffer. But when you're bringing in brand new rentals as fast and as soon as possible, as well as upgrading the surrounding infrastructure, so it becomes a place that you want to live. And on the rental side, and most of our communities, we have waiting lists because of some of the supply chain constraints that we've noticed in getting the homes to the property. It's been a bit tough, but we once they're there, we're almost able to rent it out as soon as possible.
Awesome. Well, Aaron, this has been really educational, very thorough. I appreciate it. Our students are going to love this. I think we need to have a follow-up conversation on this. If not later this semester, then definitely in the spring semester, perhaps something around the REIT symposium we host in April.
Oh yeah, that'd be great, and I look forward to coming in and seeing you in person, and also talking to the various students at NYU.
Be careful, you're gonna get a lot of emails now after having said that.
I'll enjoy responding to them and passing out some of our community information, as well as any work that I've worked on personally. So thank you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Aaron.
All right, take care.
Cheers. Be well.
You too.